Greetings fellow members of the Esoteric Order of Gamers, and the coverage continues of Conquest, the last argument of kings. Yes, in this video we're going to actually put the miniatures together. It takes a while, but it's a fun and relaxing thing to do of an evening. As you can see, I've already gone on to the next step. I've primed the miniatures and I'm about ready to start painting. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we have to build these creatures, and I'm here to show you how to do it. So come with me now on a journey as we build the miniatures from Conquest, the last argument of kings. Okay, let's get started on putting some of these miniatures together. So I've got here a sprue of the men-at-arms. So I'm going to start with a simple man-at-arms, and I've got my tools. Here are my little clippers, plastic clippers. I've got a nice sharp scalpel, and of course be very careful with your fingers. Don't cut yourself. Always try and cut away from yourself, or if you don't do that, make sure you've got a very, very controlled stroke happening when you cut. You really don't want to slash yourself with a scalpel. I've done it many times and it's no fun at all. And I've got some plastic glue. This stuff is really good. You can use any plastic glue, of course. This usually has a wire here which lets it come out in little tiny amounts. Unfortunately, I've lost that, so a little bit more is going to come out than I want, but that's okay in this case. So there's my glue, and first thing I've got to do is chop off the bits that I want to make up this figure. So we've got all kinds of pieces here, and they can go together in different configurations. Beside me I'd have my instructions, so either straight from the website or PDF downloaded from the website at para-bellum.com. You can get the instructions for putting these together. So I will get a shield, and as you can see I'm using the clippers to cut as close to the piece as possible, like that. And then I'll get some legs. Make sure you're not chopping off any of the actual piece itself, just sprue material. There you go, some legs. I'll need a torso. As you can see, I'm just randomly picking bits here, but if you want to, you could chop out all these bits and line them up on your work's surface and decide exactly which pieces you want to go with which. I'll take a head here. It's a few different designs of heads. There. I'll need a couple of arms. There's a sword arm, like so, and a shield arm. There's one. And I've got my shield. What else do I need? I think that's about it. That's about it for these. You can do these one at a time. Actually, what I like to do is maybe do about 4 at a time. So I'll get the pieces for 4 figures, and I'll line them up on my work surface and mix and match and decide which I want to go with which. So the next thing I've got to do is clean these up a little bit. If you look closely at a piece, we have 2 little problems. One are the little nubs where I've chopped it off the sprue, and another one is these mold lines. And this is the excess plastic that happens when 2 parts of the mold come together. It varies how noticeable this is. Sometimes I don't even bother with it. But in this one I'm going to give it a little bit of a cleanup. And you can do this with your scalpel. Games Workshop also make a special tool for removing mold lines. It's very similar to a scalpel. It's the same kind of process. So for those little nubs, I'm just going to carefully cut off the little bits of excess plastic, making sure not to remove any detail. As you can see, I am cutting towards myself, but I've got a very, very controlled stroke. I know exactly where that blade is going to go. And there we go. And then sometimes for mold lines, you can either slice them off, and you can do that in a little curving motion like that, just slicing off that little bit of extra plastic. Or you can use the edge and just scrape like so, and that'll scrape off that line of plastic quite smoothly. So a mixture of slicing. You might want to slice when you get into these little gaps, or these little hard to reach bits. And then if it's a piece like that where it's quite obvious, you can just go like that to scrape it off. So on my shield here, you can see there's a little nub in there. Just carefully slice that off and flatten down that area. Like so. There's another one. That's all you need to do on that one. And I'll just go through these pieces, cleaning that up. And you can do that, you know, as quickly and as finely as you want to. It depends how perfect you want things to be. I usually do this pretty quickly because, you know, I'm not going to worry about it too much. They're not display pieces, they're gaming pieces. So you want to get this done pretty quickly because it's a pretty boring step, really. One place where you always want to scrape off is usually around the top of a head, especially if it's a helmeted head, like this one, because there'd usually be a line. There's a little nub in there. Carefully scrape that off, and then scrape down the mould line. Sometimes when I'm painting figures really quickly, I don't even bother to clean off this stuff, and I do it after I've primed the figure. And the reason I do that is because when you've primed a figure, it's really obvious where the imperfections are, and sometimes you can leave some of them alone, and sometimes you can clean off the more obvious ones, and it's easy to tell once you've primed the figure, which I know is a little bit weird, but I find it a fast technique. But in this case, I'm giving all the pieces a clean before I put them together. Okay, there are my cleaned up pieces. Now I'm going to put these together. So I take a base, that's one of my bases, and a bit of glue. And don't put too much glue on, you don't really need too much. Because remember, the glue actually melts the plastic, so you've got to be careful you don't melt any detail on the plastic. Put that on the base there. Now you could let each of these pieces dry in between putting them together, but I'm too impatient for that. Let's pop some glue on there and put on a torso. And because I've got this right leg leading, I'm going to have the torso bent a bit so it faces towards that leg. There he is. And I'll pop on the head. Sometimes I find it's better to put on the head last, after you've put on the arms. But in this case, I know which way he's going to face, so I'm happy to put it on that way. There's his head. And I think I'll let that dry before I put on the arms because I don't want to dislodge any of those pieces. So it's a good idea to let that dry. And again, if you're doing a whole sequence of these at once, you can go through, do all those bits, let it dry, and then come back and do the arms. Okay, I've let that dry for a little while. Let's put on the sword arm. And you can see with some of these pieces, there's a bit of variety. I could put, you know, up here or down here. Just depends what I feel like. I think I'll have this one about there. You can see the plastic glue attaches pretty quickly, so you can check and see if that looks okay before you absolutely let it dry. Then on the other side, let's pop in the shield arm. Make sure you check it from all angles and see that the pieces are fitting together well. Let's complete the man of war by putting a bit of glue on his arm and attaching the shield. And that just attaches direct to his shield arm. Find a good angle for it. There he is, one completed man-at-arms. Okay, in the meantime, let's do a force-grown drone. Force-grown drone? Yes, force-grown drone. That's a bit of a tongue twister, isn't it? And I'll take some legs and a torso, a shield, and a head. Then we need one arm, which will be the weapon arm, the spear arm, and one arm that goes into the shield, that's the one with the hand. Here we go. There's the one with the hand. And finally we need a spear. Now there are two types of spears. There are ones that fit on if they're being thrown overhand, and another one that's being thrown underhand or held straight up. So there's a bit of variety there for posing them. Again, I'll just clean the flash off these and then start gluing them together. Okay, there are my pieces. I'll get a base. Once again, a bit of glue on the feet. Now, if you want to, when you're first putting these together, you can use a little bit of blue tack and just do some experimental test fits and see how they turn out. Because you really don't get a really good idea of how things fit together until you start actually fitting them together. Again, I'll let that dry before I put on the arms. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of glue on the shield and attach the arm. I've made a few of these, so I've worked out that it's easier to attach the arm directly to the shield. And then I've got this arm here, a bit of glue there, attach it to the torso, like so. Now these arms come in various configurations, so you'll soon work out what the best way is of attaching the weapon. In this case, it's going to be straight up like so, and that works well. I'll show you the different configurations you can have for this a bit later. Just make sure that's in there nicely. That's attached. Actually, I think I'll have it like that, so it's just he's holding it above the ground a bit. Check it from the back, make sure it's fitted. Okay, there we go. Now I'll definitely let that dry before I put this shield on. Let's put our shield arm on this drone. This is probably best done from looking from the back. And there he is, huddling behind his huge shield. Let's try something bigger now. This is a brute drone, and it's a great figure, really chunky and aggressive looking. I've already cut out the pieces and cleaned the flash off. This goes on one of these larger bases. That's the large base. And I love these movement bases, aren't they great? That just slips easily into there and allows for ranking together your different figures. Now in this case, there's only 3 figures in this unit. I've already made up 2 of them. Here's one. Look at that. How'd you be meeting that on the battlefield? It's going to be great. And then we've got this guy. Really nice pose. I like that pose. Now the thing is, you've got to be careful when you're making these and make sure they rank together well. So as you can see, they work fine. If I wanted this guy to face forward like that, obviously that's not going to fit as well there. So I can have him go backwards a bit. So just muck around with the configuration and see how it looks on the battlefield. So, you know, see how the figures work together. Because when you do the next one, which will be here, I want to make sure this one is arranged in a way that makes this unit look good together. Now, of course, there's a lot of leeway here because you can spin these around and take them off and you can do all kinds of things. But just something to keep in mind when you're putting your units together. If you've got a larger unit, you don't have to worry about this so much. But with a small unit like this as well, you want a lot of variety between the different poses to give it a lot of animation. So I don't want to make another pose that looks, you know, really close to that one, for example. I want to do something very different. I've got 2 torso pieces, so let's glue those together. Something like that. It's good to just hold that firmly together until it takes a grip. Some really nice gribbly detail in these particular figures. Look at that. It's got a sort of alien feel, doesn't it? Then a couple of pieces make up the legs and lower torso. If you do put a little bit too much glue on, just wipe it off when you put the pieces together. Make sure it doesn't dry hard and spoil your detail. Now here's where I start thinking about the pose. So if I have my base here, I'll stick the legs on. Usually when you're putting a figure on a base, you really just want it to be a little bit back from the front. So don't put it right in the middle. Allow a bit more space up the front because that's where the arms are going to be. And it just balances the figure out a bit more, I find. The important thing is how we pose this torso. So he goes on like so. And because it's just a ball and socket joint, there's a lot of leeway there for posing him. So, well, let's just give it a go. Okay, we've got 2 weapon arms. Make sure you've got them on the right side, so you want the thumb facing up. So there we go. And of course, there's different combinations of these weapons, so you can, you know, do them in whatever combos you like. And then I'm going to stick the arms in. So these are pretty interchangeable, these arms. They go either direction. I'm just going to line up these straps. So a bit of glue in there. It's a bit of leeway, as you can see. Do the same with the other one. Try something a bit different there and give it a really sharp angle. Then I just put those arms into their ball sockets and play around with the angle. So I'll have this guy brandishing his left arm up like that because I haven't done that with any of the other figures. And then for the other arm, that's sort of more suitable because he's kind of going "Rah!" and just putting both of them up in the air. That looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to pop on the head. Now this is the important part because you really want your head placement to sort of work well with. And look at that. See, just putting that head facing that angle really improves that pose because now he's sort of facing that way. And he'll be doing a kind of side-on look when we put him in that lineup. And these are the kind of happy accidents you can have when you put them together. So there we go. Let's do something a little bit more challenging now. This is one of the cavalry figures. We've got 3 household knights and 1 mounted noble lord. This is one of the household knights. So we've got the body of the horse. We've got the face armour of the horse. This is the bit that goes in the front of the saddle. I'm sure there's a special name for these. I don't know what they are. Shield, tail. We've got an arm here, a cloak. The helmet comes in 2 pieces. There's the bridle, the reins, the lance, 2 parts for the torso, 2 legs, and bits of cloak that go onto the horse. So a lot of pieces, but they're very easy to put together. First thing we do is, of course, the horse body. You don't need too much at all. I'm probably putting a little bit too much extra because I've got this large opening on my glue container. And as you can see, that fits together beautifully. We'll just hold that together till it dries. This is where this large scale really comes into its own because you can see there's just heaps of lovely detail on this horse barding. They're really impressive figures. You know, horses should be pretty scary on the battlefield. They're often made in a scale which is too small for the figures that are on them. Horses are pretty big. Then a bit of glue on the top of the head and we can pop on this bit of armour here. This bit goes up the front here like this. Hold on, which angle is it? There we go, like that. Now, of course, there are instructions to do this available on the website, as I mentioned, but they're pretty intuitive. Very easy to put these bits together. Moving on to the knight himself, we just attach the 2 bits of torso together. Wipe off any excess glue. Attach the helmet and the crest. And then that goes on the top of the torso. Just check it from all angles to see that it's sitting on the body right. Then we've got 2 legs. These fit very cleanly into those sockets. Next we've got these bits that attach to the horse armour. And another one on the other side. And of course in the back we've got a tail. Next up I'm going to attach these reins. We put a little dab right where the bridle is on the mouth and a little bit in that spot there, and then carefully attach that there and that on the mouth. It's a little bit fiddly, but just to hold it in position. The good thing about plastic glue is that it grabs hold really quickly. And then the same on the other side. You can look at that from the front, see that it's lined up. Now it's attached well there, looking good. It's a pretty stunning horse, isn't it? Looks really, really good. So that's the horse done. I'll just finish the rider and we'll put on his shield arm. He has a cloak streaming out from the back, which fits into a little notch. And then finally his lance arm. This is where you can choose to have the lance pointing up high or straight or whatever you want. You might have it pointing down a little bit, so he's trying to land something on the ground. And then you just might want to do a test fit on the horse to see how that works. That fits beautifully. Finally, I'll put the shield on the shield arm, and then all we have to do is put him on the base. Center it on the base, and there we go. Very impressive looking piece of cavalry there. It's going to be quite a challenging paint job really, because I've got 4 of these to paint. But it's going to look spectacular on the battlefield. Right, the next thing I'm going to do is the Abomination, and this is made up of 4 sprues. It's quite a large figure, and I'm using the instructions here on the PDF to put it together. So the first assembly is the carapace. These are the pieces. I've clipped them out and cleaned them up, and now I put them together. It starts with these two pieces, and they go together along that edge. So put a bit of glue there, clean off any excess glue. Again, I'm using too much glue here, so just use a tiny bit when you're doing it. You don't need a heap, and just hold that together while it dries. And I've got these two pieces, they go together along that edge. Then that piece fits onto that piece like so. This is looking truly horrible already. This bit goes onto there like that. Actually, I've just realised before that bit goes on, you want to glue this bit on, so I can do that quickly while the glue's still wet. So that slots up into there. Next we've got two large back pieces. This lower piece goes in first, and then this upper piece overlaps it like a shell, which is just what it is. Okay, so that's one piece. We'll let that dry. Now we've got the torso pieces. This front torso, a top bit here, a back, another top piece. So we get this bit, and these two bits fit together like that. Then there's this back piece, which slots into there. You can see where all this is going to go. It's going to sit on there. And then finally this bit goes on the top like that. You can see it all fits together beautifully. It's very well made. There we go. Wipe off that excess. And there's our torso piece. And of course that fits into there. And I won't glue that yet because I just want to muck around with the pose first. Next up we've got the two arms. These are the pieces. So if we get one of these, oh actually we'll do the mid-arm pieces first. These fit together like so. We've got like an armoured side and a fleshy side. And then these are ball and socket joints. Again, I'm not going to put these together just yet. These look like, that's the top there. It goes together like this because I want to play with the pose. So let's leave those pieces for the moment. Okay, here's where things get a little bit more challenging. It's the feet. Now there's a set of two front feet and two back feet. The back feet seem to be smaller, and the front feet are larger because their thigh pieces are made up of two pieces that go together like so. So I've got all the larger pieces over here. I've cut them all out. Larger pieces here and smaller pieces here. For some reason, I think to give you a lot of variety in poses, we've got heaps of feet. So many feet. So really there's a huge amount of choice in feet here. They're all ball and socket joints. So I think I'll be using bits of blue tack till I'm happy with the pose. But in the meantime, the first things I'll do is put these large thigh pieces together, or the front legs. Now usually you'd find the back legs would be stronger than the front legs, but I think the way this goes together, because of the thorax, the back legs are smaller. And then I'll also put together these calf pieces. Those two fit together like that, and these little ones fit together like that. And then once all those pieces are together, I can start playing around with poses. Just a tip, when you're putting these kind of shapes together, you can do your cleanup after you've glued the shape together, like so, and then scraping the mould line, or the part where they meet, will sort of fill in that line between them and smooth it out quite nicely. Okay, this Abomination figure, it is a bit of a challenge, I have to say. I've tried to put it together a couple of times now without success. Tried to use green stuff, that's why I've got a green residue here, hoping that would hold it together to get it in a pose, but that didn't work either. So I'm using this as a guide. This is from the website, and just following that configuration of legs, and I'm going to stick them together piece by piece and see if I can build up the figure that way and make sure the legs are completely dry before I put on the body. So I've decided to use the two large legs for the front, the ones that stand up like that, and the smaller ones that also stand up like that for the back. I've studied the photo of it, so I've got a pretty good idea of how these go together. Then I've got large thigh pieces here, and they go in
Actually, this bit's the wrong way around. That goes like that. Then this bit goes like that. That's my leg. So I'm going to... Unfortunately, they're all ball and socket joints, so there is no way to keep them together while they're drying without actually sticking them in that position, which is a little bit restrictive. Making sure this texture is on the outside of the leg and this fleshy bit is on the inside. This is where this is another little tip. I'll tell you, a little bit of green stuff can really be handy if you've got it ready, because it will give you a bond while things are gluing. Just a tiny bit. You're probably thinking, this is all very messy, this guy should know what he's doing by now. And I do, but as I said, I am rushing slightly because I'm filming at the same time. I'm also doing this at a slightly uncomfortable angle because of the camera, so there's all kinds of factors that make it a little bit trickier than it would normally be. I would recommend that you take a little bit more time and go a bit slower than I am here. Right, so I've got those 4 legs. There we go. I'm just going to let those dry for a little bit until the point they're almost solid, but I've still got a little bit of movement in them. And then I'm going to try attaching them to the base and attaching this thorax. Okay, after mucking about quite a bit, this is a tricky model to put together, and the reason is that we have 1, 2, and where it joins to the body, 3 ball joint sockets on each leg. So if you try to put it all together at once, you're dealing with like 12 ball sockets, none of which are holding together by themselves. What it really needs is some ways of putting the pieces together so you can then play with the pose, not have it fall apart. But as it is, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to come up with a pose without actually gluing everything. So what I've done is just eyeballing it and seeing that these 2 bits fit into here. I've put together these 2 legs. Just excuse the mess in there. I'll clean all that up later and it'll look fine once it's primed. But I just was using a bit of putty to close up some gaps and sort of keep things together while I was building this. So this gives me a bit of a basis to build the rest. A firm basis. This is nicely glued in now. So you can see if I attach the body there and just roughly put 1 leg there, I'm at pretty much the right place on the stand, which is good. So it's just going to be a matter of gluing all these pieces in one by one and to the base. It's not allowing me to do anything too dynamic. Oh, I've got that the wrong way around, don't I? It's this way. This thing's towards the front. It doesn't allow me to do anything too dynamic with the legs, as I said, because I can't really pose it beforehand. But what I really want now is just a good solid base for the creature to stand on. I'm happy with these legs because they make the figure look a bit taller instead of a flat leg like that one. These ones are sort of standing on the toes, which looks good. And as I said, I've got these smaller feet at the back and the larger feet at the front. There we are, we've got the body on. Now let's glue on these 2 legs. Now if you're building this and you find, oh no, the leg doesn't fit perfectly, remember you can always do things like put a bit of terrain or a rock under there or something. But in this case it seems to be working pretty well. I must say these figures have been very easy to put together with the exception of this Abomination. This one's a bit tricky, but all the other figures have been very easy to construct. And then finally I'm going to attach this last leg here. Here's my final leg assembly. Now as you can see I used a bit of green stuff to just prop up that last leg a bit. It's all looking good, perhaps a little bit off center on the base, but I've got to tell you this was a nightmare to build. It's a very imposing figure, it looks great, but there are just too many ball sockets here to build this with ease. So I'm a little bit frustrated after building this one, but I've finally got this bit done, the rest will be easy. You might also want to use super glue for this as well because it glues faster and stronger. Yeah, quite a tricky build this one, a little bit harder than it should be. Right, the first thing to do is glue in this torso. It's going to go there. While that's drying, I'll take these 2 head pieces and glue them together. And I'm going to put the head on directly now. I'll put some glue on there. This really is quite a huge, surreal alien thing, isn't it? Right, because we've got multiple ball joints again, the only way I can really do this is to roughly pose it and then stick the pieces together and hope that it all works out. I've got this arm I'm going to have kind of down here, a bit closer to the body, and then the other one is going to be out in a more aggressive stance. So I'm going to kind of glue these together a bit like this. You can see I've swapped to super glue here because I want a bit of a faster bond in this case. Okay, well, it's interesting. If it doesn't work, I can always pull it apart and try something else. Okay, that isn't too bad actually. I just think I want this one to be a bit further up, so I'm just going to break that off and bring it up further so the arm is a bit more raised. Now it's looking a bit more threatening. Not too sure about this hand, however. And there it is, the beast is complete. It's huge. If we take a normal man-at-arms here, look at that. How'd you be with that? Coming at you. I actually don't know what he's reaching for because nothing is that large on the battlefield. It is absolutely frightening. It's a strange model, you know. I like the weirdness of it. I like the design of it because it's so bizarre. I just wish that it had been put together so it was easier to articulate, because I've seen other people put this together and they always end up with this quite static pose, and the reason is because it's so hard to put these ball jointed pieces together because nothing is supporting the weight of anything as you put it together, so you can only glue it bit by bit. So I think that's a bit of a design flaw. If they had some form of lugs that would actually stay in place, you could probably pose it a little bit more. But even so, with arms like that are made up of piece, it's hard to get any kind of fluid motion, and it does look a bit stiff. That's the only criticism I have. Otherwise, the detail is stunning. The design is weird and wonderful. It just looks a bit robotic and a bit stiff, which is a shame. But what a piece! I mean, that's a real centerpiece, and I'm really looking forward to putting together the Nord Giant as well, because that's, I think, about the same scale, and these two facing each other off on the battlefield would be pretty spectacular. Well, folks, look at that. Very impressive amount of stuff in the starter set. Here are the men-at-arms for the 100 Kingdoms. You can see, even though there's not a huge range of poses, but when you get them ranked together like that, there's a lot of variety. It looks great, and it'll be really easy to remove these as casualties and also move them around. You can push the whole lot around because it's only 6 stands. Looks really, really good, and when they're painted up, especially with shield designs, they'll look fantastic. Here we've got the mercenary crossbowmen. They look great. I've got a front rank of ones kneeling down and a back rank of ones standing up. So when you put those together, that's what you end up with. And each stand, as you can see, 2 in front, 2 at the back. 3 stands of those. They look really good. Then we've got these really spectacular household knights. And this is where the larger scale just really looks fantastic, because these are big, chunky models with a lot of detail in them. Don't they look fantastic? Really impressive. I've had a few reservations when I first opened the box and looked at the sprues, and I thought, oh, the poses are a little bit static, but, I've changed my mind completely, really. They look fantastic as a group, and the large scale is really impressive. I just think these are going to look great on the tabletop. It's just getting used to a larger scale. It's a bit unusual after some of the games I've played, but when it comes to things like the knights, I mean, look at that. They look great. We've also got a mounted noble lord up the front here. Really impressive figure, that one. So, yeah, great stuff. So, heading on over to the spires, and these are the force-grown drones, and very impressive unit of those. It's a unit as big as the men-at-arms, and they're all wielding spears, and they look absolutely terrifying. Nice range of poses. There's ones that are standing up straight, other ones with spears overhand, other spears underhand. Really impressive unit, that one. Then we've got the brute drones. Imagine meeting that on a battlefield. They are frightening. We've got a ferromancer who looks like a wizard type figure. He looks great. And finally, the terrifying Abomination. Look at it. Look at the size of that thing. I hope the knights can go up against that, because it really looks like a tough customer. I wouldn't want to meet that on the battlefield at all. It's going to be really impressive once I get it painted up. And finally, you get 6 objective markers, which is a really nice touch. There's 3 for each side, and they've got a lot of character, and I'll be using those in other games as well, for sure. They're great little markers. So my final verdict, I think this is just brilliant, and I'm really looking forward to playing some games of this. The next step, of course, is a big one. It is painting them all. The first thing I'm going to do is texture all the bases, then I'm going to prime them, and then I'm going to start the painting. And I'm going to take you through the painting process so you can see how I end up painting up these armies. And then we're going to play some games with them. We're going to look at the game system and see how it works. So lots to look forward to here on the Esoteric Order of Gamers about Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings by Parabellum. Stay tuned, and through the coming weeks and possibly months, we'll be looking a lot more at Conquest and seeing how it plays and how it looks. But so far, I'm really impressed. I hope you've enjoyed this look at putting together the figures for Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings.